I'm Nima Rajan. A new report says the costs of abandoned oil and gas wells in Alberta are falling unfairly on landowners and taxpayers. Braden Larson with the University of Calgary's School of Public Policy says the scope of the problem is growing rapidly. Over the last 6 years, the number of inactive wells has quintupled. More than half of all oil and gas wells in the province no longer produce, but haven't been cleaned up. Mr. Larson says fewer landowners are getting the rent they're owed, and taxpayer-funded settlements rose 12-fold between 2014 and 2018. Parliamentary budget watchdog Yves Giroux is pegging the cost of the NDP's campaign-style plan to cut student debt at about $4 billion over 5 years. New Democrats want to cancel up to $20,000 in tuition, freeze loan payments through July of next year, and do away with interest payments. A fall 2020 Statistics Canada survey revealed about 60% of post-secondary students were concerned about their finances. Well, meanwhile, the University of Calgary's Students' Union says the school is proposing some extreme tuition increases. They include a 32% tuition fee hike for domestic engineering students and 51% for international students. The students say there is a proposed tuition increase of 25% for a Master's of Business Administration and a 15.7% hike for the medical doctor program. The university says the tuition increases are intended to ensure continued educational quality in high-demand programs by offsetting the impact of recent provincial budget cuts. The largest container cargo vessel to call on a Canadian port docked in Halifax last week. The Marco Polo is 396 meters long and can carry more than 16,000 containers, each one about the size of a mid-sized school bus. It's the first ultra-class vessel to visit a port on the east coast of North America. A coalition of First Nations, property owners, and Parks Canada is aiming to round up and kill up to 500 European fallow deer that have grazed the landscape and trampled ecosystems on Sydney Island, north of Victoria. The deer were introduced to neighboring James Island in 1902 as prey for hunting parties before invading Sydney Island in the 1960s. Parks Canada controls about 440 hectares of the island as part of the Gulf Islands National Park Reserve, and another 1,500 hectares of the island in Coast Salish First Nations territory are divided into lots. A Conservative MP from Alberta says he's receiving fewer angry calls about his party's climate plan. Ron Leipert says those in the West have had to explain why the party adopted a carbon price to constituents. He says he gives people the analogy that when they buy a case of beer, there is a 10-cent per can levy they get back when they return their empties. Clean Prosperity Executive Director Michael Bernstein says while the Conservatives made progress in their plan, they risk losing ground on the climate issue. Yellowknife student Riley Oldford has been learning from home for the past 14 months because of his cerebral palsy and a chronic lung condition that put him at a greater risk of getting COVID-19. So the 16-year-old was thrilled when he became the first person in the Northwest Territories under 18 to get vaccinated. Reporters, photographers, and health officials watched as the teen got his shot earlier this month, something Riley says made him more nervous than the jab. He's still going to need to isolate and keep his distance until he gets his second shot, but he is hopeful he can soon see his friends. Memorial University of Newfoundland could soon be named the Memorial University of Newfoundland and Labrador. The school says University President Vianne Timmins proposed the change to the Board of Regents, and they approved it in March. The request has now been sent to Education Minister Tom Osborne, and Ms. Timmins says she doesn't expect any opposition. The university is based in Newfoundland, but has been expanding its presence in Labrador. Home Depot sales jumped 32.7% from a year ago to hit $37.5 billion in its latest quarter. That blew past Wall Street expectations. Home Depot's profit nearly doubled to $4.1 billion as the pandemic prompted homeowners to invest in their living and working spaces. Well, across the country, thrift stores have been flooded by household items and the offerings of people who have been homebound for months that are eager to clear out some of their possessions. The problem is most items could most accurately be described as trash. Many of the donations are defective or worn-out items, gifts from well-intentioned people who want to reduce waste, but who donate items that simply should not be donated. In the midst of spring cleaning season, the stores want to slow a barrage of unwanted contributions that increased during the pandemic. Coming up after the break, a look at how Ontario is starting its reopening process after this recent wave of the pandemic and what's in store across the country. We'll talk with MP Dean Allison, the host of the Hill Update, after the break. This interview and more national and international news coming up today on the Forum Daily. So stay with us, everybody. We'll be right back. Last week, Ontario unveiled a three-step reopening plan that will lift public health restrictions based on vaccination rates and other indicators starting in mid-June. The province reopened outdoor recreational facilities on Saturday with some restrictions. Premier Doug Ford says the province can start to loosen restrictions because COVID-19 case rates and hospitalizations continue to decline while vaccination rates increase. Step 1 of the province's reopening plan is expected to begin the week of June 14th and will see some non-essential retail reopen with 15% capacity limits, allow outdoor gatherings of up to 10 people, and outdoor restaurant dining with 4 people at a table. The government says the province will remain in each stage for at least 21 days, only moving to the next stage if specific vaccine targets are met and health system indicators remain positive. Well, joining us now to give us a deeper look at Ontario's reopening plan is Mr. Dean Allison, MP for Niagara West and the host of the Hill Update. Welcome back to Forum Daily, Dean.
Thanks for having me here today.
So to start, we've moved from this color-coded restriction for levels in the province. Is this new three-step reopening plan a better system?
You know, I've never been in favor of lockdowns. And so when you change the system, that just indicates to me that maybe you're trying to hide the job you're doing before. And I think, anything that gives direction is a good thing. But let's remember, there's a lot of other provinces that are already open for some of these outdoor activities. And I think it's been a long time coming. I'll say it once again, better late than never. But I really believe that we should have had outdoor activities going all this time. We never should have been in this place.
And considering that every time restrictions loosen, COVID case rates are also impacted. So how do we make sure that we don't end up back in a lockdown situation shortly after reopening?
Yeah, and that's therein lies the challenge, right? I think as we vaccinations start to roll out and people continue to get vaccinated, I think you're going to see an impact on that. I think that's important. But let's also remember seasonality, right? We're coming out of flu season. We're coming out of the winter time where we're all locked up and cooped up in our homes, and we're actually getting a chance to be outdoors more. And typically, that's usually good this time of year, anyways, for types of virus rates as well, just because people are getting outside and getting some fresh air.
And how does this plan affect small businesses that are waiting to open? I know there was a lot of concern regarding this sector.
Yeah, and this is where I'm most critical. I think that small businesses have been rocked. I think they've been treated unfairly. I think they're getting slaughtered right now, and I think this is way too long. We should be talking about having them open their patios for the last couple of weeks, not waiting another 3 weeks to have their patios open, and then possibly another 3 weeks after that to have indoor dining. This is a critical time for a lot of restaurants in the spring. They come through winter months. January and February are horrible months for any kind of retail, restaurants, any type of retail industry. And so when we start getting into the winter, it's important for retail. It's important for restaurants to be able to have that option. A lot of them have lost that option right now. The weather's great. We've just had a good long weekend, and there's been no restaurants that have had the benefit of being able to enjoy some patios.
Now, considering that each phase is 21 days long at least, so is this vaccination rollout happening fast enough for the province to reach this third reopening phase in just 63 days?
So I believe the province is doing the best they can, and the rollout has been great. The challenge, as you just pointed out, is supply. And so at the end of the day, the federal government has failed miserably on this front on being able to secure vaccinations. And so while the province has been ready to go, they've been ramped up. They've had to shut down, they've had to slow down, they've had to curtail their ability to get vaccines out just because they haven't had enough supply. So the question is, the government of Ontario in particular is trying to do the best they can, and provinces all across the country, based on the data they have today. But that doesn't mean that if there's a problem securing some of these vaccines a couple of weeks from now, that may change and may alter their plans once again.
Just a little over a minute left, Dean, but are there any lessons we can learn from other provinces that are also loosening restrictions?
Yeah, I think, there's been a number of provinces that already had their plans out. Saskatchewan comes to mind. They were open or had a plan almost 2 weeks ago. There's been outdoor dining available in BC for some time now. I think all these things are very important. I mean, it's crazy as you look across the country. There's absolutely almost a different plan in every province. Every province has done something different. If you're on the East Coast, you're actually in lockdown. You actually can't get in there. So I think that by and large, the province is doing the best they can. But as I said, I think lockdowns do affect businesses negatively, as well as children and a number of other people around mental health issues.
All right, Dean, it's always great having you on Forum Daily. Thank you again for joining us today.
And thank you. Have a great week.
Stay with us. When we return, Walmart eases its mask requirements in the U.S. A slave trade exhibition opens in Amsterdam, and the world's oldest man reveals his secret to a long life. But you probably wouldn't want to follow that secret. More coming up on the Forum Daily. Stay with us. In April 2020, pediatricians found that some children with COVID-19 had an inflammatory syndrome that included fever, rash, gastrointestinal symptoms, and inflammation. Experts thought that it could also happen with adults, and now a new report in the Journal of the American Medical Association is documenting 15 adult patients with multi-system inflammatory syndrome. It is very similar to the rare syndrome found in kids, but with fewer deaths. Right now, there is no specific treatment for it. The U.S. Preventative Services Task Force is lowering the screening age for colorectal cancer from 50 to 45. Colorectal cancer is one of the most preventable types of cancers because it is often easily detectable through screenings and because it grows more slowly. Due to screenings and prevention efforts, the incidence of colorectal cancer has declined in Americans over 50, but for an unknown reason has been increasing since the 1990s in those under 50. The world's largest retailer has taken steps to ease masking requirements. Walmart says it will no longer require vaccinated shoppers to wear masks in its U.S. stores, and workers who got their shots can stop wearing masks as well. However, Walmart says state or local requirements may override their rules. As for enforcement, Walmart says customers are on the honor system when it comes to that. More than a year after coronavirus shutdown sent the city that never sleeps into a fitful slumber, New York could soon be wide awake again. Vaccinated New Yorkers can shed their masks in most situations now, and restaurants, gyms, shops, and many other businesses can go back to full occupancy if all patrons are inoculated. Subways resumed running round the clock this week, and Broadway tickets recently went back on sale. Cicadas are poised to infest whole swaths of American backyards this summer. Maybe it's time they invaded your kitchen. Swarms of the red-eyed bugs are re-emerging after 17 years below ground, offering a chance for home cooks to turn cicadas into snacks. Full of protein, gluten-free, low-fat, and low-carb, cicadas were used as a food source by Native Americans and are still eaten by humans in many countries. This year's group is called Brood X, and they can be seen in 15 eastern states from Indiana to Georgia to New York. Environmental groups and scientists with 2 universities want U.S. wildlife managers to consider reintroducing jaguars to the American Southwest. Habitat destruction, highways, and segments of the U.S.-Mexico border wall mean that natural reestablishment of the large cats in the region would be unlikely over the next century without human intervention. Jaguars are currently found in 19 countries, but they've lost about half of their historic range. Several individual male jaguars have been spotted in Arizona and New Mexico over the last 2 decades, but there's no evidence of breeding pairs established. King William Alexander opened an exhibition at the National Museum in Amsterdam that examines the Dutch involvement in the international slave trade. One of the first objects on display is a thin iron rod with the interwoven letters GWC at the end. It was used to brand the initials of a Dutch trading company into the skin of enslaved workers. Amsterdam had a significant role in the global slave trade, and the 10 stories in the exhibit span 250 years of Dutch colonial history and 4 continents. Vaccinated Saudis are being allowed to leave the kingdom for the first time in more than a year as the country eases a ban on international travel. For the past 14 months, Saudi citizens have mostly been banned from traveling abroad out of concerns that international travel could fuel the outbreak of the virus within the country of more than 30 million people. The ban, in place since March 2020, has impacted Saudi students who were studying abroad, among others. Australia's oldest ever recorded man says eating chicken brains is one of his secrets to living more than 111 years. Last week, retired cattle rancher Dexter Kruger marked 124 days since he turned 111. A day older than First World War veteran Jack Lockett was when he died in 2002. Mr. Kruger told the Australian Broadcasting Corporation from his nursing home in a rural town in Roma that eating chicken brains weekly had contributed to his longevity. The founder of TikTok's Chinese owner is giving up his post as CEO to focus on longer-term initiatives, but he gave no details of what that means. Zhang Yiming says co-founder Liang Rubo will succeed him as ByteDance's chief executive. ByteDance is waiting to learn if the Biden administration will revive former President Donald Trump's efforts to force the sale of TikTok's American arm as an alleged security risk. Movie studios are set to release a steady flow of summer blockbuster movies for streaming-weary audiences. Titles include F9, the 9th installment of the Fast and Furious series, Marvel's Black Widow, and the big screen adaptation of Lin-Manuel's Miranda Tony-winning In the Heights. All right, stay tuned. We'll have more stories from around the world coming up after the break, only on the Forum Daily. So stay with us. We'll be right back after a short break, everyone. As prisons close around the U.S. amid declining crime rates, officials are looking at how they might repurpose the buildings. Since 2009, the percentage of U.S. residents who are in prison has dropped 17%, according to the Federal Bureau of Justice Statistics. Former prisons have been converted into homeless shelters, centers for troubled teens, and in at least one case, a movie studio. Some prisoner rights advocates are calling for the buildings to be demolished to remove any incentive for using them as prisons in the future. Home construction fell a surprisingly sharp 9.5% in April, with analysts attributing part of the decline to builders holding back on starting new construction because of a surge in lumber prices and other supply constraints. The April decline left construction at a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 1.57 million units, according to the Commerce Department last week. That was down from a rate of 1.73 million units in March. Well, not long ago, many Americans were asking what they would have to give to score a COVID-19 vaccine. Now, in Ohio, there's a lottery. Governor Mike DeWine has announced a weekly $1 million prize and a full-rights college scholarship to lure more residents to get vaccinated. It starts next week. Elsewhere, restaurants and fast food chains are gifting grub to those who got the shots. Free beer and sports tickets are also being offered to those who offer their arms for a vaccine. A key group that monitors internal displacement is reporting violence and disasters forced people to relocate within their own countries more than 40 million times last year. That was the highest such tally in over a decade. Often such movements are caused by worsened by the impact of climate change. In its latest annual global report, the Swiss-based Internal Displacement Monitoring Center says a record 55 million people were living away from their homes, but within their countries at the end of last year. China says it is providing COVID-19 vaccines to nearly 40 African countries and describing its actions as purely altruistic. Foreign Ministry official Wu Peng compared China's outreach to the actions of some countries waiting to finish vaccinating their own people in an apparent dig at the United States. The U.S. so far has committed to sharing 80 million of its doses with the world. The UN Security Council has called for more COVID-19 vaccines to be made available for Africa, where only 2% of doses have been administered. Brazil's federal police have carried out searches to investigate whether key figures within the Environment Ministry facilitated illegal timber exports to the U.S. and Europe. Minister Ricardo Salles is among those being probed. The Supreme Court authorized the search of nearly 36 locations in Sao Paulo state, the Amazonian state of Para, and Brazil's federal district, according to a police statement. The police operation stems from a justice determination that there appeared to be a contraband scheme with Minister Salles' involvement. A report by the International Energy Agency says immediate action is needed to reshape the world's energy sector in order to meet ambitious climate goals by 2050. This includes ending investments in new coal mines, oil and gas wells. The Paris-based agency said in a report that there is a narrow but viable pathway for building a global energy sector with net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Several countries, including the U.S. and Canada, have pledged to stop releasing more planet-warming gas into the atmosphere than can be absorbed by mid-century. World leaders and tech giants are putting their heads together for an important cause: stopping the spread of extremism on the internet. The meeting comes 2 years after a white supremacist in New Zealand killed 51 Muslims and live-streamed the carnage on Facebook. During the meeting, attended by the U.S. for the first time, French President Emmanuel Macron warned that the internet is still being used to spread hate. The immunologist who leads the COVID-19 response in the United States says the undeniable effects of racism have led to unacceptable health disparities. Dr. Anthony Fauci says those disparities especially hurt African Americans, Hispanics, and Native Americans during the pandemic. He says many people in minority groups face obstacles starting at birth, including lack of an adequate diet and lack of access to health care. Gardeners have been tending the flower beds at Giverny, France, that were the pride and joy of Impressionist painter Claude Monet, creating a living artwork. But the splendors of Monet's house and gardens have been locked away for the past 6 months by the pandemic. Last week, the gardens that inspired Monet's world-famous paintings of water lilies and other masterpieces reopened, with a cap of 200 visitors to the house and gardens per hour. All right, I'm Nima Rajan, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. Remember, for news on demand, you could always visit our website, thenewsforum.ca, and be sure to follow us on our social media handles, available on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also watch all of our commentary programming on the News Forum YouTube channel. All right, thank you for joining us on the Forum Daily, and happy Victoria Day, everyone. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.